Welcome back. Now we're ready for lesson 2 of the Exquisite Scrap Quilt. I want to make sure that all of you go in and print off the downloadables. These are all the pages that go with this quilt. So you're going to get like a whole little booklet with all the steps that we're taking to make this particular quilt. So now we're ready for lesson 2, and it's 2 pages is all we have in our downloadables for this one. So I want you to pay attention to this design layout right here. Now, what I want you to notice is that on the diagonal, we have light and darks sewn together. So there's 3 of them. And in one corner, it's light and mediums. And in the other corner, it's medium and darks. So that means we need 6 lights, 6 mediums, and 6 darks to be able to sew this group of blocks together. Okay? So all I did was reach in there and take 6. And so I'm going to just reach in here, and when I tell you it really doesn't make any difference what color you sew together with what color. This is not a time for you to matchy-matchy because we're just using up our scraps, right? And so the only thing I'm going to do when I choose these is make sure that I don't have 2 of the same fabric. So there's 1 dark, and there's 2 darks, and there's 3 darks. Let's go back here and get a different brown one. And then how about one of these black prints? So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need 1 more. And so let's go back here and see about a polka dot. So you can see that they can be a little bit of everything. And you'll notice that I have sorted out my fabrics, and I did these in 3 flat trays so that you're able to see exactly what I see when I look at my tray of fabric. And so these are all of my marked lights where I've drawn the line diagonally. All of these have the line diagonally on the mediums, and then the darks, we're just going to pick those up and use them. So I told you that we needed 3 light mediums, 3 light darks, and 3 medium darks. So that's what I'm going to do, and so I'm going to pick up 3, and the only thing I do, because you've marked both of these, is I try to make sure that I have those squares going in the same direction. And so I'm going to come over to my sewing machine. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how I've set the sewing machine up before I start sewing. I have the stitch length at 2.5. I have 50 weight thread, cotton thread, and I have my 1/4 inch foot on the machine. And so I'm going to be sewing 1/4 of an inch on each side of that line that we've drawn on there. So what we're going to do is we're going to line up our squares, and now I'm just going to start sewing. And now I need 3 of these, so I'm going to pick up another set of lights and mediums. Now I need 1 more set of those. And you notice if we've cut accurate 4-inch squares, that I really don't have to do any pinning. I just have to line up 2 sides and put it underneath the presser foot and sew. Okay, so I have 3 light mediums all sewn. So now I'm going to pick them up and I'm going to sew 3 light to dark. Again, we're just going to line up those 2 edges. And now I have 3 mediums and darks to sew together. Now, I told you sometimes I'm not fussy, but I don't think I'm going to sew those two. I think it'll look better if I switch these two around. So I'm going to put this polka dot with the tulips. And the black and white with the leaves. This whole concept of this quilt really has to do with letting the color value, the light versus the medium, the light versus the dark, medium versus dark, that's what makes this quilt work. Okay, so now you know I started out here with the thread saver, and so I'm just going to put that in there. And so now I can cut this apart. Now, the one thing that you don't want to do yet is you don't want to cut these apart. You're going to leave them all strung together because this is one block. And so now I'm going to reverse it, and I'm going to sew down the other side of our drawn line. So I'll be sewing on the left side of this now for the other side. Okay, so you saw how this one lined up. I can see my drawn line. But now do you see on this one my drawn line isn't there? And ask me how I know this, because I've actually sewed 2 or 3 of these where I had 2 lines on the same side of my drawn line, which either you rip them out or you just throw those 2 squares away. You just need to make sure you flip it over and that you can see the drawn line. Okay, now you can see here this one now is flipped. I need to flip it over so that I always should have the light on top in this batch. Again, need to flip it over. Now you will have to pay attention when we get to the light and mediums, because we have lines on both sides, like this one did. You just need to make sure you're stitching to the left of your line. One of the things that we need to do is that we can now cut these apart, but we're going to keep them in the same order so that we can keep the orientation. So I'm going to clip and just stack them one on top of the other. Okay, and so this is enough to make 2 blocks. One of the things that I like to do is to not make two identical blocks. So as I cut these apart, I will sort them into two different piles. This will be the quilt block that I'm going to sew together. And this is going to go into, I'll bring out 3 more trays so that you can see what happens next. But I will have the other half of these so that I can mix them up. So we're going to take a short word from our sponsor, and when we come back, I'm going to show you how we both cut these apart and trim them.
Tracy's Tables has all of your custom sewing table needs. Visit tracystables.com to see the complete line of unique tables, carts, and shelves. And all of Tracy's tables are made in the USA.
You know, it's never been proven, but we all know that the floor gets 2 inches farther away every year on your birthday. We can help you out with that. You need a design wall. Check us out at offthewallquilt.com.
Okay, now you're just going to continue sewing strings like that of the whole block that has 3 light mediums, 3 light darks, and 3 medium darks. And I just want to show you how I sort them out so you can just keep sewing and sewing and sewing. Is I've got them in this stack of three medium darks, 3 light mediums, and 3 light darks. And then I just stick a pin through them. And that'll hold them together until you get ready to sew them. So you can see I've just taken stack after stack after stack, and so I've got 5 stacks here all ready to sew on both sides of the line. That just speeds up your process. You kind of make it more mechanical. So then I've cut these apart, once we get those cut apart, now it's time to cut them into half squares. And now I'm going to lay those over here. I'm going to sort these into 2 piles so that I don't have to make 2 blocks that are identical. Trying to keep those in order since I had them all programmed out of exactly the way we needed them. Okay, so this is 2 blocks now that I have all cut apart. Next thing I'm going to do is a pressing demo, and I'll show you a quick way to press these when we come back from the next commercial.
I'm Amanda Murphy, and I'm a quilt and pattern designer. The Bernina Q16 is quilting magic. One of the hallmarks of a great quilting experience is when you lose yourself in your work.
Bernina, made to create.
So now we're ready to press our half square triangles. And you'll notice that I have them laying here on my mat so that the dark side is up. And the reason I have it that way is that we want the seam allowance to fall to the dark side. So whatever side you pick up is where that seam allowance is. You see how the seam allowance automatically lays right there? And then we'll press it open. So want to make sure that we don't disturb the bias on the seam line. So I'm going to set one corner, and now you're going to set the iron so that you press with the grain of the fabric. And I'm going to stack these one on top of the other, set the corner, press with the grain. Set the corner, set the corner. As you know how sometimes you get a pleat on the front, and so that's why you'll see that I am ironing on the front side of these pieces rather than on the back side. So again, we're going to set the corner, and press. And really, I'm just letting the heat of the iron do the work. And so now you can see that I have, in just a matter of a couple minutes, I have pressed all 9 of those. Now, I told you that I only want one block in this color scheme, so I'm going to take light, medium, light, medium, light, medium, and I have another tub over here that has lights and mediums in it. I have light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. I'm going to throw those in there. And I'll tell you why I have them separated like this, is it's real hard to remember sometimes of, did I make that a light or a medium or a dark? And so if you sort them in this, and then you can see what I can do, is I can come back and I can pick out 3 of these. Oops, I didn't press that one. I didn't press that one either. I guess I didn't get them all pressed from my last little sewing spell here. But you can see how those 3 would be totally different than the 3 mediums and darks that I have in this pile. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to trim this one, or press this one. Oh, you're going to do this, and I want to show you what I did. You won't know it until you get to this point, but you'll see what I did is I picked up 2 squares that I sewed with this one. So the easiest thing to do would be to just come along and cut this one off, and I'll lay that aside so that I can do that. Okay, so when we get to this point, we're ready to trim, and we're going to take a short word from our sponsors, and when we come back, I'm going to show you how we trim these half square triangles.
Everything Mary strives to make people's lives brighter by designing and creating craft storage solutions. From sewing storage to general storage, we make items varying in material and uses to make your creative journey easier.
Sewing, the choice of fabric artists for 40 years.
Okay, so now to trim these, I'm using the revolving mat from Off the Wall Quilt, and I've lined up my diagonal line on my stitching line, and you'll see that I put a piece of tape at 3.5 inches because that's what we're going to trim these down to. And so you can see that I have only a tiny little bit. I mean, it's like a 1/16 of an inch, but I'll tell you why it's important for us to have cut these squares 4 inches, because we're using all different kinds of fabric. Some of it's loosely woven, some of it's very tightly woven, and we're better off to have to just trim off this little bit than try to squish in that 1/16 of an inch on some of these fabrics. So we're just going to trim off this little bit. And so you can see that's not very much that we're trimming off of there, but what it's going to do is it's going to give us accurate 3.5 inch squares. And then I need to turn around and I need to trim off our little dog ears on the other corner. And now it's all trimmed up and we can match up the corners as we go along. So let's do another one. I'm going to line up my diagonal and I'm going to line up my 3.5 inch edges. And so you can see, do you see how we just have a really tiny little bit here that we're going to trim off? I actually took a picture of the pile that I had, and it was just a good handful that I had trimmed off all of these squares that I had squared up. We'll do one more, because then I think you can see exactly what I'm doing, lining up the diagonal on the sewing line and 3.5 inches on the edges and trimming it off. So you see, there's just a little sliver, but it makes all the difference in the world on your sewing when you get ready to sew this all together. There we go. And so now you have some homework to do before we get together next time when we will sew our blocks together. And again, I will encourage you not to sew your blocks together because we're going to do this in a chain piecing method, which will make it a whole lot easier for you to sew the blocks. Before you leave today, make sure that you go to quiltweek.com/letsquilt and register for the great prizes that our sponsors that are giving away at the end of this class. You're going to want to make sure that your name is in there because you can't win if you don't enter. So if you're watching this show on Quilt TV, I'd encourage you to go hit the subscribe button, and then every time we post a video, you're going to get a notice about that. And join AQS. We have lots of great things coming up for 2022.